Hi, I'm Hannah Nepilova, an integrative counsellor, and welcome to Therapy Chats, the podcast where I talk to specialists from different fields of mental health. Today I'm speaking to Stefanie Michele, the US-based binge eating recovery and body healing coach, about her therapeutic approach to clients who have a difficult relationship with food.
So binge eating is largely a reactive eating disorder to restriction in many cases, not all, but in many cases. So where where restriction exists, binging will follow. I was always of the mind for a very long time that as long as, if my binging would stop, that I would stop restricting. And that was sort of the deal I made with myself, or with whoever, whatever force controlled this in my mind. I'll stop binging if I'll stop restricting if I can stop binging. What happens is that this works the other way around. So binge eating is the reaction to restriction because restriction is perceived by the body as threatening and dangerous. And so binging will follow. So part of the work here to bridge towards the present moment is, number one, we have to look at regular eating, which is a pretty common strategy for binge eating recovery. That's not much different than what is offered in the mainstream. But also to understand, like, where in the restrictive mindset is the lack of safety. So where is that coming from? Is it the perception that if we're not restricting, we will what? We will not belong, we will be rejected, we will be seen, we will be unseen, the invisibility or the visibility lens. Like, there's so many different reasons restriction feels safer. So working on how do we feel safer in our own skin so that restriction isn't as needed, and then the binging might, decrease. And the same would go for non-restrictive bingers. So people who are binging to keep themselves safe from feeling, to keep themselves visible or invisible, to keep themselves from experiencing nervous system dysregulation that comes from these unsafe sort of feelings. And so I do a lot of work concretely with the practice of orienting. Have you heard of this? So orienting is, maybe you've heard of glimmers, because this is a very talked about idea right now. Glimmers is noticing the moments in our day or the moments in our even our current environment. So orienting towards what's okay and what's safe. So for example, I'm sitting here in my office right now, and my golden retriever puppy is laying on the floor, and the sun is coming in the window and landing on him, and he's sleeping like a little love. And just looking at him and noticing all of that just in the here and now, like, invites a breath for me that is will naturally just occur when we're paying attention to things, and when it gives our nervous system the chance to sort of understand, oh, you're in an interview, but also, there's a lot of like calm around, and there's a lot of safety, and there's peace around, and things are okay out here. And when you can take that in here by just using your senses to notice those things, the more often that we're doing that, the more we're giving our nervous system the chance to breathe, instead of to run on the in here, which is mostly suggesting that, okay, we have this to do, and we have that to do, and we have this, and all the things going on in our mind that sort of keep us in the vigilant state. Mm-hmm. So we want to kind of address that overvigilance that some of us have with calm and regulation and ease that is coming from the present. And the more that we're able to interrupt the vigilance inside with the regulation outside, that this does slowly inform the nervous system, even outside of conscious awareness. So I've noticed in practicing this myself and with clients that over time, what happens is that we just find ourselves less activated by things that maybe used to trigger us a lot, or we're able to eat food and it doesn't turn into a binge, that there's just something a little bit calmer inside that's able to then stay more present in a moment like that. Mm-hmm. And the more we're training ourselves towards that, the more, the nervous system is learning how to relax and be more flexible.
Okay, so orientating yourself in your present space is a big part of it. Is there other work you can do to help to orientate yourself?
Yeah, so I call priming. So let's say that you're having a moment like that, and you're noticing that everything's fine. You're looking at your dog, everything, you're noticing it. It's really taking it just a bit of a step further to prime your brain and your nervous system to understand that that's happening. So as you feel the breath of the breath coming into your body, and you feel your muscles relaxing a little bit, it's kind of just stretching that moment out a little bit to notice it. Sometimes that requires some slowing down, which I'm doing just in a micro way right now with this pace of my speech, bringing myself back in my chair, feeling the ground underneath me, and just understanding and really taking in purposefully and intentionally that I'm okay right now, and everything's okay right now. And it just takes a couple of seconds of priming yourself to really understand that, as opposed to just experiencing. And we will normally notice something like that, but we won't stretch it out. So to stretch it out is to prime it so that your brain understands and your nervous system understands, this is what we're looking for. This is where we're trying to go more often. This is important. And by telling it that it's important, you're priming it to say, okay, noted, I will be on the lookout for those things, and I will note, and I will let you know when they happen, and I will also take them in more consciously.
I see. So things like consciously slowing yourself down, slowing down your speech, slowing down your movements, and then being really aware of the fact that you are doing that in the moment. Okay.
Yes. As opposed to just kind of bypassing it and saying, oh, that's nice. Okay, bye. It's just more like making it longer so that you're telling your whole body, this is actually important.
And I know that, I mean, a lot of people do yoga, and that is quite similar in principle, isn't it?
Yeah. It's somatic work, right? So yoga would be a version of being intentional about that. But this can occur, outside of a yoga pose or anything like that. It might just be while you're working. It could be while you're going to sleep at night or waking up in the morning. I mean, it's more looking at in the more subtle moments of life to be finding these things and being intentional about them. And then also working with how the body is actually registering that. So noticing the somatic sensations that you're having when you're tense, when you're calm, when you're scared, when you're angry, when you're sad, and just paying more attention to the cues you're getting from the body, as well as all of the cognitive stuff. Just it's kind of folding in the somatic with the cognitive. That is the overall strategy.
I know when I was doing my counseling course, the lecturer spoke a lot about this 80-20 rule, that 80% of you is reacting to your environment, reacting to the situation around you, and 20% is always checking in with yourself and asking yourself, how am I actually feeling? Am I enjoying this conversation? Am I enjoying this situation? Yeah. Sounds kind of like what you're describing.
Yeah. And maybe shifting the 80-20 to maybe be more 50-50 more of the time. So that there's more checking in with the self and more, noticing that, rather than always being driven by the external and what our default patterns are to do.
I see. Yes. And can you think of other ways that you might start to generate a sense of safety for people?
So those are some of the somatic and nervous system approaches, but I think that there's also some that do come from more cognitive restructuring. So one of the things that people with binge eating and any eating disorder are dealing with is body image, right? So body image is one of the other areas of safety that it's important to cultivate in eating disorder recovery. And one of the reasons that I think a lot of us don't feel safe in our bodies or with our body images, because the world at large is presenting to us ideals of what we need to be. I mean, we all know this, and we all can attest to that. So I actually, one of the most mainstay strategies that I have is to use social media to our advantage. In many ways, social media is not to our advantage and is distracting and toxic in a lot of times. But it also can be used very intentionally for good. So every single day, and this goes for the 5 years that I have been in recovery, every single day I have accounts that I follow, and I post on my social media feeds all types of bodies. So bodies that are all different sizes, different colors, different textures of skin, just so that the constant exposure to different varieties of bodies, you have to be intentional about, because you're not going to get that passively. a lot of people will shy away from that and say, like, I don't want to look at a body that makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't want to look at a body larger than myself. That means that I'll be letting myself go, or I'll be, sort of like accepting something I don't want to accept. But the truth is that the more that we're not seeing and not exposed to diversity, the more that we're setting ourselves up to feel like it's dangerous. So in order to feel safer in our bodies, we have to feel safer with all bodies. And that comes from exposure, and being able to tolerate sensations of discomfort when they come up when we're looking at bodies that we're kind of usually conditioned to reject. So that is another slow burn kind of strategy, where the more you're exposing yourself to things you're uncomfortable with, bodies you're uncomfortable with, the more that you're actually building safety with them. Provided that it's not triggering you to the point where you're becoming overwhelmed and having some kind of trauma response to it. But if it's within your, a little bit of a stretch zone, to be able to integrate that in over time, you will be able to look in the mirror more and feel more safe about doing that, and look at other people and feel safer about doing that, because it's not seen as this otherness as much anymore, which implies rejection and, being not belonging, which is one of the biggest, obviously the biggest threats to our safety. So this idea of bringing others in, other bodies in that sense of belonging, inherently brings you in as well.
And I can see how that really applies to binge eating specifically. And it does make me also wonder whether you can apply the same principle to all sorts of, other phobias, other fears, if there's a certain kind of environmental factor that might leave you feeling better, whether you could start to introduce that as a kind of exposure therapy,
Sure. Yeah, I just think with bodies, it's you're up against this idea that that's wrong. Like there's a message that, like, it's bad to have a body that's different than the ideal. So there isn't an invitation to do that at all. And so sometimes we have to kind of overcome our own biases and the biases coming from outside of us that say, this kind of body is bad. We have to sort of actively move against that to say, no, it isn't. And that that I'm going to go against the mainstream, which in itself can be activating. But it is one of the ways that we, in that sort of pushback, there's empowerment, actually.
And do you also challenge kind of ideas or preconceptions people have about different body types through conversation? Actually dig into why do you feel this way about having this particular body? Can we reframe the way you think about it?
Yes, of course. And most people can generate, can kind of go, most people that I talk to, I would say 98%, when asked that question or a question like that, will reflect back to a time that they were maybe 12 or younger, and say, well, there's this one time, I remember when, so-and-so in school, or I had my mom took me to Weight Watchers or something. And there's always this childhood, if not adolescent moment, where you learn that, where it's kind of like, this was the moment where I realized having this kind of body was bad and having this kind of body was good. So going back and to name the value of the past is to go back and to deconstruct that a little bit and to understand that differently in the here and now, as, oh, like that was my mom's issue with her body that she was projecting onto me, that like that was what that was about. Whereas if you don't revisit that, you're still assuming that it's like, no, this was good and this is bad. To see it under the lens of your present self is to sort of dismantle a lot of that bias, and to see how society did that. I mean, there's a lot of reels on social media right now looking at the 90s and the early 2000s, and the media, the shows and the advertisements that were on then, that really convinced us in a way that couldn't happen anymore. That this kind of, that women were objectified and were there to be objectified. To deconstruct that, you'll still be left with residual feelings. It's not like that does the whole job. Obviously, that's intellectual.
Yeah, but it does help, and even an inch, is still an inch. If you feel just this much better, that's
correct.
And it does help you to disentangle past from present, and reality from messaging.
Correct. Yes, which is half the battle. Yes, and you have to start somewhere. And to your point, 10% is better than nothing, and it's actually where you start. I think a lot of perfectionism exists in this field, or in eating disorders, and in binge eating as well. And so this idea of like, oh, well, if I can't be completely better, if I don't love my body, then it's not worth it. And it's simply sometimes just like dialing it down a little bit.
Okay. Well, Stefanie, thank you. I feel like you've given me a lot of different things to think about. And it makes you see how actually one of these problems that the issue of binge eating is something you have to come at from different angles, don't you?
Yes.
So
Oh,
probably
all sorts.
one
Yes.
size
You never
fits
run out
all.
of topics.
Yeah, it's like a kind of Pandora's box, isn't it? You go,
Yeah.
whoa, gosh, yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, get out the whole toolbox.
Yes, definitely. It's a long process, but a worthy one.
Gosh, well, thank you so much, Steffi, for giving up your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to hear more of the same, then feel free to subscribe to our podcast or visit our YouTube channel at Kent House Counselling.